lot of people go through life doing things badly. Racing's important to men who do it well. When you're racing, it's life. Anything that happens before or after, it's just waiting.
Matt Williams got a brilliant start from the third row of the grid.
He's gone, he's hit him, he's straight off at the chase.
A half-second lead. Oh, with the sizzling car in the background.
He hasn't. Oh, he's round on the last lap.
There's a massive accident.
Next to the inside, what a move, what a move.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Queensland Raceway, round number 9 on the AMS Oz Super2 calendar for season 2019. By the time the 2 races tonight are over and done with, we will be through approximately 14 of the 21 races scheduled for this season, so that means we will be through 2/3 distance in the season, and that's since we first set foot on the tracks in Adelaide back at the beginning of March, and it's taken us all the way up until the beginning of August to get through 2/3 the season, and then we have from the start of August all the way through till the end of November to get through the final third of the season. Still plenty of racing to go, but tonight it's all about the sprint races. Fast, furious, 20 laps times 2 races, and we're certainly looking forward to seeing the drivers get their elbows out and some great side-by-side battling tonight. It's a solo effort today, just myself, Nether, aka Steve DeVries, bringing you the Super 2 action tonight. Hans Brunswick, unfortunately, has come down with a bit of a bout of hay fever and sneezing uncontrollably, unfortunately. So, wish you all the very, very best, Hans. I'm sure you're watching back at home, and it'd be great to have you in the box a little bit later on this month when we tackle the 10th round of the championship, which, as you can see from the calendar, will take place at Calder Park Raceway. That is the final of the sprint races on August 29th, and it's going to be the old V8 layout, so it's not going to be the combined road and oval layout. It's going to be just the standard road layout, and then that will bring the sprint racing to a close. The Calder Park circuit is deputising for the lack of a circuit in the Bend Motorsport Park in AMS Oz and in AMS in general, so a worthwhile substitute there. And then we start to get into the real tough stuff. Pukekohe, Mount Panorama, Sydney Motorsport Park, Sandown, and then Oran Park, which is deputising for Newcastle. All big, long feature race events and endurance race events there. So hopefully a little bit more news to come on the Mount Panorama endurance event, the Bathurst long distance race. We are potentially looking at a little bit of a different format with regards to qualifying and the race for that. So hopefully there'll be a little bit more on that between now and the end of the month. But for now, all about Queensland Raceway, the Paperclip as they call it. 2 races tonight, 20 laps each, just a touch over 62 kilometres in terms of distance. Only 6 corners. Very, very simple circuit to learn in terms of what direction you have to go, but all 6 corners are very, very different to each other. It delivers a close race. The circuit in general, in real life, is very, very bumpy. And drivers have got to learn to pick their braking point quite early and try and stick to it as much as possible. You go fractionally too deep, even 2 or 3 metres past where you should be braking, and you might get upset by the bumps that this circuit presents. And of course, as you can see there are only there's 4 right-hand corners, 2 left-hand corners. The left-hand side of the car is the working side of the car, and the lateral loads on those left-hand set of tyres are very, very high. Turns 1 and 2 especially, very, very quick through the 2 right-handers, the 90-degree right-handers, and a large amount of load goes through those tyres. Then you've got the 2 hairpins that are both left-handers, and then the 2 infield corners, corners 4 and 5, the only 2 right-handers on the circuit. So it's not scheduled to be a pit stop race. You can make it comfortably on no stops here and just under 100 litres of fuel from the figures that we are hearing. but with a bit of luck, we won't have to worry too much about seeing anybody in the pit lane tonight. But it'll be interesting to see who can preserve their tyres the most. A quick look at the driver point standings while we wait for the warm-up session, so the qualifying session to get underway in about 5 minutes' time. And here it is. So with 12 of the 21 races gone, it's still Phil Boak who leads this championship. If you remember, he got out to quite a big margin very, very early in the season with those 2 race wins, which came at the second round of Symmons Plains and the Phillip Island round, and he did start off the season with a pair of second places at Adelaide and Albert Park, and Foley had 2 disconnects before he managed to get himself on the board. So he had opened up quite a margin, Boak. That has shrunk quite substantially over the last couple of rounds. It's now only 114 points. Then back to Will Devonish in third. He needs a win or 2 and he can be right in contention for this year's title. Back to Mitchell Hathaway, who was our race 1 winner at the very, very beginning of the season in Adelaide, and he'd slipped a little bit. He's still in that fight. But then have a look at this logjam from 5th all the way down to 9th. There is absolutely nothing in this. So Cam Rutledge on 12.75 all the way down to Ricky Slick on 12.09. Only 66 points the difference there. Not very much at all. And with sprint race points for 150 points for a race win in each of the 2 sprint races tonight, so 300 total across the night, those point standings could change very, very quickly depending on where these drivers finish. So a lot playing out there. Back to Billy Dougal-Salonga and JP Courier and Dwayne Davies rounding out the top 12 there, and there is a little bit that we will just touch on in a few moments' time with regards to BDS and JP Courier. A little bit of housekeeping that came out of the last round at Townsville. Well, actually, let's go and have a look at what happened in Townsville, because there was a subject of a couple of penalties that did come up as a result of being investigated, and this is the first one. This is Billy Dougal-Salonga in the HDS car behind, Brendan Ross in the FCR Motorsport car in front. Now, this didn't look all that inconspicuous on the broadcast, but when you look at it there, a little bit of a shove, run Brendan Ross wide, and BDS got through. The position was not redressed, and if you have a look at it from BDS's point of view, and if you listen in to the car audio, you will see that he just out-brakes himself a little bit. He gets on the brakes a little bit too late, and then tries to carry a bit too much speed through, and just ends up running into the back of Brendan Ross. So there was a pit lane drive-through penalty imposed after the race for that incident, 30-second drive-through penalty. But this was the big one. Now, what you didn't see here is before BDS goes wide and just clouts the wall there, he had rounded up the lapped car of Cracker, and JP was closing in on him here. BDS leaves room on the table there through the left-hander, then on the right-hander, gets his turn in all wrong and runs into JP and takes them both. In actual fact, he ended up on his roof there, as you can see, did BDS. The game resets it, as you can see just there, and then he got going again. Then we come to the onboard from JP's point of view. Now, he was quite a fair margin back from BDS at this point, but then having gone wide, Cracker then gets back ahead. JP manages to slip up the inside with the gap that's there, leaves some room on the left-hand side there for BDS, and then gets tagged. Very lucky to keep it from rolling there too was JP, but then gets clouded for good measure with BDS coming along after that. And then from BDS's point of view, now we've taken this one from the driver's point of view just so you can see what happens. You can see there's in the rearview mirror, top left, JP's there, so he knows that he's there, leaves some room on the table at the left-hander here, and you'll just see JP sneak out. There he is, just very, very quickly and very briefly snuck out of the blind spot, as they like to call it for these drivers, depending on how they run things. And that was the end of that. So that actually did attract another 30-second penalty for BDS. So he's copped it on the chin, which is great to see. And that dropped him down the standings from 4th to 6th overall. So that's why he ends up down the order. Now, consequently, we believe that JP Courier, from what we understand, has pulled the pin on the series, and if that's the case, that's a bit disappointing. He did have those 3 race wins in a row and was looking like he might have been able to take the fight up to the PBF Pair a bit later on in the standings if he had been able to keep going, but sadly not the case, and it appears that he has given up pursuit of this year's Super 2 crown in AMS Oz. Now it looks like we are getting set for a qualifying session start here, as the session has just ticked over from the practice session into qualifying, and there is just a little bit of a delay at the moment while drivers get themselves sorted, and also while the server gets itself sorted as well. So we'll bring you the live pictures in just a few moments when all the cars sort themselves out for this qualifying session. Will be an interesting qualifying session. It was Mitchell Hathaway who was at the top of the standings, but not by very much. Actually, we can take you to live pictures now, everything having just been sorted. And there is the man in question on screen, the Mother HDS Racing entry of Mitchell Hathaway, who ended up on the pole. And looks like we are away and running, with a handful of drivers taking to the pit lane as the session has gone green. 15 minutes on the clock, and as we tend to see these days, Termo, the first of the men out on the circuit, the 715, the first of 2 Nissan Altimas in the field, the other being piloted by Glenn Miles, the Spitwater Cleaners Nissan Altima. Joined out on circuit by Brenton Foley. Very, very early for Brenton Foley to be going out onto the circuit. We normally don't see him. There he is, just in back of shot behind Termo. We normally don't see Foley out at all. Or Steve Burko goes for a bit of a slide out of turn 2. And joined by his teammate Zach. Cam Rutledge, Brownie and Glenn Miles have now made their way onto circuit as well. And we will stay with Termo as he will be the first man to set a benchmark lap time. If you haven't followed this before, the rules of qualifying are pretty simple. There are 4 laps on the board. Your first lap is taken up by your out lap, preparing the car. You got 2 flying laps, and then you come in. So timing is of the essence. You go out a little bit later on in the session. You tend to reap a little bit of a benefit with the track condition. And we will stay with Termo lights on for a flying lap of Queensland Raceway. Here's turn 1. Medium to high speed right hander. And the second corner comes up very, very quickly. Got to spot their braking point. Get the turn in right. Try and use as much of the exit curb as you dare. It's not very wide, so you don't want to go too far off track, or you try and use too much. And a 24.5 for the sector 1 split, which comes up just before the braking zone into turn 3, the right hand hairpin, the first of the 2 right hand hairpins. And now the drag out of turn 3 up to the pair of left-handers, the only 2 left-handers on the circuit, turns 4 and 5. A little bit lower speed than turns 1 and 2. It can still carry quite a good amount of car speed. A 47.2 to the middle sector. So not too bad from Termo. His sector 1 time has already been immediately surpassed by Foley with a 23.9 and a 22.2 middle sector for Foley and a 22.7 for Termo. And Termo sets the initial benchmark of a 109.3, but it's immediately about to be surpassed by Brenton Foley. And here he comes, and he's into the 8s, almost into a 7. Brenton Foley, a 108.088. Purple in all 3 sectors. Zach jumps ahead of Termo now as well in the FGX Falcon. Steve Burko, his teammate, with probably a slower lap than he would normally expect to be doing. 2.5 seconds off Foley's pace. Brownie and Rutledge across the line as well. So we stay with Foley, already nearly a 10.5 up at sector 1. So looking good. A little bit of a slide just off the exit there of turn 3. Won't hamper his speed too much. You can use a little bit of the road that runs to the left there to improve your corner exit, but you don't want to take too much, otherwise you will be pinged for a track violation. Look at this, nearly over 2.5 tenths up on his own Sector 2 time and his own best lap time. Goes a little bit deep under brakes. He might have just lost all that time there, and here indeed he has. And he's given up the ghost. So he was purple in Sector 1, 23.7, and a 22.119 in Sector 2. And he was looking very, very good, Brenton Foley, to go into the 7s. But a little outbraking mistake there at turn number 6 has cost him dearly. Zach improves his time. Great job. 4 tenths off his best and only a gap of 4 tenths to Foley. A very, very nice job. This man was set for an outstanding result at Townsville until engine failure scuppered that attempt. But he is one definitely to watch. He's definitely got some car pace. Time starting to come in. Termo's improved his time a little bit. So too Rutledge. And they're done. Burko's done. Brownie and Rhodey, or Ben Rhodes, out there in the PBF car. Oh, that's a little bit too much grass off of turn number 2. Took a bit too much of the exit ripple strip. And as a result, he's down 1.2 seconds on his time and out to the weeds and into the marbles. So dare say not going to be an improvement on his time there. But a 1:11.7 is still pretty respectable for Rhodey in this time of race. And being a very short circuit as well, it tends to mean that, as he goes off circuit there at 4, it tends to mean that the racing will be close and the times will sort of be nullified somewhat, as our practice 1 time leader in Mitchell Hathaway in the 31 car has now made his way out onto the circuit. His teammate as well, Billy Douglas-Salonga, who we spoke about all but briefly, is out there too. And just behind him on circuit, Dwayne Davies in the FGX Falcon. The John Player Special Tribute livery, there it is, just out of back of shot, as we like to call it. Let's see what Mitchell can do. He's been pretty good the last couple of weeks and rounds, despite his DNF at Townsville. 2 third places, 2 fourths and a 5th in the last 5 races that have taken place. So he started to find some of that form. The downside for Mitchell, he's had 3 DNFs on the season. Townsville, second race at Simmons Plains, and the Phillip Island round where the HDS cars effectively took each other out at the final corner. That's a little bit too wide at turn 2. Down to the Sector 1 timing split, 6 tenths away from Foley's time. So this is currently set provisionally to be a lap time that'll take him up to 3rd on the grid with his first attempt. Outside of his DNFs for the season, actually sorry, one of them was a, actually no, it was a DNF, I was looking at the wrong one there for a moment, but outside of his DNFs, his worst result is 7th, which was the first race at Albert Park. So being 7th or higher in all the races you've contested to date is very, very good for your point standings, and that's why he is 4th overall in the point standings. 303 points off the current points leader in Phil Boak, 8 tenths off Foley's time on his first flying attempt. So lost a little bit more time around the lap as Dwayne Davies pops up in P6. And we see Devonish is now looking like he's coming out onto the circuit as well. Let's have a look at his split time down here at Sector 1 on this run here, Mitchell Hathaway. And he's found a good chunk of time, much better through turn 2 and very close to Foley's time, 5 tenths or half a second up on his own time. And you'd see there he did use a little bit of the return road just to maximise his exit speed out of turn number 3, which you can do. You just got to be careful how much of it you take. And he's up. And he's up on not only his own time, but he's up on Foley's time as well, just marginally through the second sector split. And the second sector split is between turns 4 and 5. He's got the final corner much better than Foley did this time around as the camera just sorts itself out. He was purple through the middle sector, was Mitchell Hathaway, and he just misses out. So he lost out in the last sector there, but still very, very good provisionally on the front row. 108.254 for the HDS racing driver. Great job. This grid's starting to tighten up a little bit. Gary Neville for FCR Motorsport now comes out for his attempt at qualifying with just under 6 minutes remaining. And here's Will Devonish to the final corner. And in actual fact, what we will do, seeing as Will has been very, very kind in doing some videos over the course of time, we will take an onboard lap from the bonnet cam of Will Devonish. See there, just looking for a little bit of a late apex through turn 2 to maximise his exit down the straight here, the longest straight on the circuit. Down to turn 3, and you can also get a real understanding here of how narrow the exit curves are and the curves on the inside and the outside of the circuit, and how you really don't want to try and use too much of them. You just want to use just enough. Sector 2 split now for Devonish. 10th and a half away from pole time, so this will be right up there challenging front row with Mitchell Hathaway at the moment. With only a handful of runners left to go. Again, goes a little bit deep. Oh, car broke into wheel spin there on the run out of 6. And he ends up 3rd, so lost a little bit of time as the car broke traction. Using all the road, even including some of the pit road, the pit exit road, to try and swing that car hard right through turn 1. And that's a good line through turn 2. Meanwhile, behind him, Gary Neville starting his first flying lap. And Devonish nearly 2 tenths down at the Sector 1 split. Different driving style compared to what some of the other drivers have already exhibited in this qualifying session. Devonish looking more so for the drive off rather than the drive into the corner, especially down there at turn 2 and 3. Found a little bit of time on his PB there, or the car just wanted, the rear end just wanted to get away from him there as well through 5. But Devonish seems to be looking a lot more for going a bit deeper, as you can see here, and then looking for the late apex to try and straight line his exit out of the corner and get better drive off. This will be an 8, and he shaves 9 thousandths of a second off his PB. Not good enough to jump onto the provisional front row of the grid, but look at that, 18 thousandths away from Mitchell Hathaway. So this is tightening up at the top of the standings. Aldo Benedetti campaigning the Brian Walsh Scuderia Alitalia FGX Falcon. About to start his first flying lap. Ricky Slick at almost just over a full second off of the pole time through the first 2 sectors. So provisionally looking at P5 here for the FCR Team Scrouse driver. They'll put him into the minute 9 bracket and actually dropped away a little bit there and lost a bit more time. So goes P6. Still got a few more to go. Now, where is our points leader? Phil Boak. He is out there on the circuit and out on an outlap at the moment, just coming up to turn 4 and 5. Brendan Ross over, 2 wheels in the air through 5. Set him wide. He was already nearly 1.5 seconds down on the pole man's time. Through turn 6 he goes. So this will be effectively a bit of a ride-off. And again, another car that wants to break traction out of turn 6. And he goes P10 as the points leader. Phil Boak starts his first flying lap. And Brendan Ross has gone deep. You saw the smoke emanating from that car through turn 1. So I think he realised that this lap is a bit of a ride-off. He just got to be careful behind not to impede Phil Boak. So far so good. Boak's got the headlights on. He's on a quick lap. His time through Sector 1. hasn't come up. Hasn't come up on our screens just there. As we look a bit further down the field, you can actually see on the live timing, courtesy of Live Races, it is a 23.9. So it's a pretty average first sector for Boak. His second sector time is very, very good though, at 22.2, not that far away from the best second sector, although he does lock up going a little bit deep into turn number 6 and then gets 2 left-hand side tyres on the grass on the exit. It's enough to go P4, but it did cost him there. A little brake lock up now into turn number 1. You can see the different lines again between himself and Devonish. You can see here he's taking a lot more curb, or staying a lot closer to the curb through turns 1 and 2 compared to Will, who wanted to hang out wide and then try and take a little bit more of a late apex and maximise the drive onto the straight. So 44 thousandths away now, Boak, as the clock is about to go 0 for the end of this qualifying session, which means no more laps. He's the only man that is out there that has really got a good shot at improving. Actually, I second guessed myself. Aldo Benedetti's gone P5 with a very, very good lap. He's only a tenth and a bit away from Phil Boak, and only about 3.5 tenths away from the pole time as Boak goes very, very deep, overcommitted into turn 6. And I think there'll be a price to pay for that, and indeed there is. He's not going to improve his time. He stays P4. Now, where's Benedetti? No, he's aborted. He's done 2 laps and he's in. So he couldn't improve any further. And there are no more cars on the circuit. So the pole lap going out early for Brenton Foley paid off by just over 1.5 tenths to Mitchell Hathaway. There you go. There's your times on the screen. Foley, Hathaway, Devonish, Boak, and Benedetti, the top 5. Leading Ford car there is Benedetti and Zach. They will share the third row of the grid. Then back to the first of the Nissans in Termo. Ricky Slick inside the top 10. The second of the HDS cars in Billy Dougal, Salonga. And then Brendan Ross rounding out the top 10 drivers. So a good session there, especially for Brenton Foley, who is continuing his pursuit of Phil Boak in the effort to retain the number 1 on the door for another season. As we said at the beginning of the broadcast, he's only 114 points adrift of his teammate, and he's been catching him hand over fist for the last half a dozen races. Well, it's at this point in time we have a 5-minute warm-up session now, even though the clock that we are staring at says 10 minutes. This is part of the new thing that has been introduced into AMSL's Super 2 for this season. Actually only started a couple of rounds ago. And what's happened is they shortened the warm-up by 5 minutes to make it a 5-minute warm-up. And the driver's briefing is held at the end of practice. So there's a little bit more time gained for drivers that have spent the time to come in a little bit earlier and practice, and therefore they can actually go home or jump offline a little bit earlier in the day or in the evening. So it'd be great to see. Nice to see a couple of guys in the live chat as well. So Brian Walsh obviously not racing tonight, but he's in there supporting Will, Termo and Glenn, and Rhodey's Racing, who obviously is a fan of Ben Rhodes, who is in the PBF Academy car, supporting himself. So nice to see him just showing his loyalty there to himself. Well, while this session gets underway and we wait to see what things are like at the end of it all, I'd like to take this opportunity just to ask for your thoughts and your prayers for this man here, the man who drives the number 92, the Whitlock Bull Bars Mark Mustang. It's driven by a man named Con Whitlock. You may have seen him in Victorian news over the last 2 nights. He's unfortunately gone missing up at Mount Buller. I've been fortunate enough to know Con for the better part of 12 years. He's an ex-client of mine. Know him from the times of looking after their IT infrastructure when his business, Whitlock Bull Bars, was only about a dozen employees all up, and they're now numbering 50. And he's well known in the local racing scene, predominantly in the sports sedan and the sports car, having driven an Audi for a number of years and switching to the Mark Mustang this year. A number of the racing members of the racing fraternity are very, very worried about his welfare and his whereabouts, as is his wife, Mandy Whitlock. Have been married for 52 years, and it certainly struck a chord with me last night when I had to look twice and to pinch myself because I didn't believe it was real that he'd actually gone missing. And from knowing him personally for, as I said, a number of years, I can be one to justify that it's definitely out of character for him to do what's happened. We suspect he's had a medical episode, but on behalf of the guys from the Victorian State Circuit Racing Championship Series, the commentators who have met Con and his wife Mandy and see them regularly at our events, we just like to say our thoughts and prayers are with you, and we hope that a miracle will happen, that we will find Con still alive and well, but in reality, the longer that the search goes on, the weaker the odds get of finding him. So we're praying for a miracle, but bracing ourselves for reality. So we can only hope. And he's a very generous man, Con. As you can see there, the Mark Mustang on the screen, a new acquisition for him. And you would have also seen over on if you follow the ASC Supercars broadcast with Stairs and Madbird, they'd been making some appeals for young Ryan Howe, who raced in the same category as Con last year in the sports cars in the Victorian State Circuit Racing Championships. Ryan, with his unfortunate accident at Barbagallo earlier this year, not of his fault. Con had actually poured some money into that GoFundMe to get that car repaired, what money that he was able to spare. And on top of that, he'd actually offered young Ryan a drive of the Mark Mustang at Island Magic, which comes up at Phillip Island at the end of November, which Ryan had basically, he said, fallen off his chair, according to Con, when the offer was made. So as you can understand, Ryan pretty devastated at the moment to hear that Con's missing, as are a number of us. So that's the kind of generosity that this man does for others around him. So our fingers are crossed, and we hope that he will be home safe and sound in the next couple of days. But we'll wait to see what happens. And a big thank you to the Victoria Police and the SES and all the volunteers that are out there doing their best to see if they can find him. We certainly appreciate what you do. We know it's certainly difficult, no matter who the person is that you are looking for. But thank you. We'll take a short break, and we will be back in just a few moments. Welcome back to AMSL's Super 2 from Queensland Raceway. The cars gridding up for the first 20-lap encounter of the evening. Man on pole there, Brenton Foley, already in the grid box. Alongside him, Mitchell Hathaway, who came within just over a tenth and a half of surpassing Foley's time. The 1 minute 8.088 lap was good enough for Foley, having gone out early at the beginning of the session, which, as we said, was very, very unusual. But it was enough to get the job done. Good strong field of 17 cars tackling tonight's proceedings, and we're just waiting on one car to get out there, which is Aldo Benedetti. There he is. Finally makes it out onto the grid. Last minute, and we're away on the formation lap. So Foley, PBF Race Engineering, number 1 on the pole. Mitchell Hathaway alongside, so an all Generals men front row. In actual fact, the front 2 rows are all Generals men. Will Devonish in the ZB Commodore having managed to jump ahead of Phil Boak for P4. Then back to the Ford pairing of Aldo Benedetti out of P5, the Scuderia Alitalia car, and then Zach, the first of the Top Gear Racing cars. For Top Gear Racing, the Ford Falcon FGX. Termo, the first of the 2 Nissans in the field tonight, 715 Castrol car, always seems to qualify very, very well. Termo, been quite well entrenched in the top 10 majority of the qualifying sessions this season. Back to Ricky Slick. I dare say, from memory, this would be probably one of his best qualifying sessions of the year, inside the top 10, P8. Normally we see him sort of on the fringes of the 10 or just inside, but 8th is a good result for him. Back to Billy Dougal-Salonga. Good return after what happened to him at Townsville in P9. Can still do some damage from there. And back to Brendan Ross in P10. Those two having come together, as you saw, lap 6 at Townsville with that little indiscretion. So they're going to share the 5th row of the grid, which will be very, very interesting. Back to Cam Rutledge, the second of the CRE Motorsport ZB Commodores. Gary Neville for FCR Motorsport Team Scrouse, all very nearly running into the back of Cam Rutledge there as they're all trying to furiously warm brakes and tyres. Dwayne Davies and Steve Burko will share row 7. Then back to Brownie and Rhodey sharing row 8. And then Glenn Miles in the Spitwater Cleaners Nissan Altima bringing up the rear of the grid. Good to see the formation lap relatively timely from all our competitors tonight. And we are set for a race start. 20 laps of fast, furious Queensland supercar action. Drive-through penalty already. Cam Rutledge, did he jump the start? But the man who didn't jump the start was Mitchell Hathaway. He's right up alongside and sweeps around the outside of Foley, but he's wide. He's very, very wide, and he gathers it back up. Will Devonish is going to try and buy down the inside into turn number 2, and indeed he does just that, so capitalises on the misfortune of Mitchell Hathaway going wide, but Foley's got the jump down the straight to turn 3. Here comes Hathaway, seizes back P number 2 from Devonish, and Aldo Benedetti's moved forward here as well. He's jumped Phil Boak as well. Boak has been shuffled back to 5th. Zach attached to his rear bumper at the minute, but this is where the action is. Devonish positions himself on the racing line. Hathaway deep again, and that puts him in the weeds outside, and Will Devonish says, I'll have that second place back, thank you very much, and jumps ahead. Phil Boak came under some pressure from Zach for just a moment, and then Brendan Ross has had a very good start. He started P10, already up to P7, moving past his teammate Ricky Slick, Termo having gone backwards there. Oh, and going in to serve his penalty, that would be Cam Rutledge. So unfortunate for Cam, he was down in 13th place when he started, so maybe just got his launch just that little bit wrong, tried to anticipate the lights a little bit too early, a little bit too eager to get off the start, and jumped it. Now Termo's sizing up an opportunity here on Ricky Slick down the inside, perhaps at turn 3. No, not close enough this time around. Look at the train, line astern. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up to 7 cars in this train, battling all the way down from 6th right down to the back end of the top 10. And these laps will go rather quickly. Only a minute 10 per lap or thereabouts, a minute 8 to a minute 10 per lap. And with 20 laps on the board, you do the math as to how long that'll take. Oh, Termo's gone deep, but he manages to avoid running off the road there. He didn't take anybody with him, did he? No, just ran a little bit too deep and rejoins pretty well, but that surrenders a few spots there. Oh, getting all out of shape, Gary Neville. Just the car jumped sideways on him out of the final corner. Had to take to the grass, but stays pointing in the right direction, thankfully. Couldn't wind up getting ahead of Termo for P11 there after the mistake that was made. As we look back through towards where Ricky Slick was again, that's where Termo was aiming at. It's still line astern for the moment. And Brendan Ross again, car wanting to jump sideways on him out of turn 3. It's very much a point and squirt sort of a circuit. You point the car the direction you want to go, you squeeze the throttle pedal to precisely the right depth, and when you get to a point where you can fully depress the throttle, you do. And a few people just getting a little bit too aggressive on the throttle pedal, as Phil Boak had a bit of a look at the back of Mitchell Hathaway there into the final corner. The door very, very firmly shut. Meanwhile, Brenton Foley has skipped away out in front to an almost 2-second advantage over Will Devonish as we look down from helicopter cam at this battle over 3rd, 4th, 5th, and I guess you can throw Zach into that battle for 6th as well. But here you go, Boak's got a good run. Boak's got a very, very good run out of turn 2. Down towards turn 3 and already ahead. Oh, a little bit of bumping in the braking zone there as well. In actual fact, very nearly got to the backside of Benedetti, but now the switchback from Mitchell Hathaway. Great racing, these two. Giving some plenty of space. We did say some elbows might be out. And Boak will have the high ground here for the left-hander at turn 4. And Mitchell Hathaway has to concede. Although Benedetti's gone wide here at turn 5, put 2 wheels in the grass, and that's going to make him vulnerable, but he positions his car right down the middle of the road. And Mitchell tries to stick the nose in there against Phil Boak. He wasn't close enough to pull that move off. And this has now allowed Zach to close on this battle as well. And don't count out Brendan Ross. He's closing fast as well. This could be very well become a 5-car battle pack in just a few moments' time. And all the meanwhile, Foley and Devonish are clearing out as Devonish still continues to pursue Foley. The gap is 1.7 seconds at the moment. Benedetti tries to go to the inside of the track to pull out of the slipstream of Boak. Here comes Hathaway again, under some real immense pressure now from Zach. A little bit of Morse code on the rear bumper from Boak to Benedetti in the braking zone at turn number 3. Hathaway tries to go around the outside here. There's no room at the in there. And that allows Zach up the inside, but he wasn't close enough to make it stick through 5. So we did say this track is going to present some action. It certainly is. Here goes Phil Boak. We locked up, and he just got into the back of Benedetti there a little bit, but no harm done. It didn't take each other out. It just compromised them for a brief moment, as Zach has made his way past Mitchell Hathaway. Great job for Zach, up into P5. And now Brendan Ross is starting to monster the back of the number 31 car of Mitchell Hathaway. So Mitchell's gone backwards from the start, 4 places. Brendan Ross just ran a little bit wide at turn 2, so he lost a little bit of speed, but Hathaway decides he wants 5th place back. Came from a long way back there to get alongside Zach at turn 3, but it just wasn't alongside for long enough to capitalise on the little hole that Zach had left for him. Oh, a lot of twitchy cars out there. You can see it there too. Zach wide of the apex at turn 5. That again, back end wanting to swap ends with the front end. Here comes Brendan Ross down the outside, looking for a late apex. Maybe going to look at a drive here. Oh, Boak made a mistake, has he? Because Zach is up the inside of Phil Boak. He won't be close enough to make a move this time around. Although Boak's locked up and gone wide very, very badly. He's going to lose 3 places. Let's see if we can pick up what happened to Phil Boak. Actually, there he was. He ran a little bit deep. He was pursuing Aldo Benedetti. So second time he's had a go at Benedetti. There it is. That's what put him in the compromising position. Down at turn 6. And then he was absolutely monstered by the FGX Falcon of Zach. He managed to pull away a little bit. Then outbraked himself. And then became freight trained by 3 cars. Return to live pitches now. Phil Boak's managed to get one of those places back. He's managed to get back past Brendan Ross. Now finds himself P6 behind Hathaway and Zach. Now, can they make any inroads on Aldo Benedetti? Because Benedetti's managed to get quite a nice margin after all that infighting. 2.3 seconds the margin there. We go back to our leader, Foley, who's got 1.9 seconds on Devonish, has just slowly been edging away at about a tenth or 2 per lap over the last couple of laps. So hasn't really been storming away at the field. He did most of his damage in the opening 2 laps, Foley, while there was a little bit of hip and shoulder with Devonish and Boak and Hathaway. He managed to extract the majority of his margin by that time. And looking at the best laps, Foley's best lap, or the last lap for him, was 108.6 to Devonish's 108.7, so only a tenth in it. Although Devonish has made a mistake in this lap because he had very poor middle sector, a 24.0 to Foley's 22.4, so that immediately has blown the gap out from 1.9 to 3.6 seconds, nearly doubled his advantage. Lap times across the control line that time around, Foley a 108.7 and Devonish a 110.4, so huge blow. Devonish making a bit of a mistake somewhere that lap. Still is quite far enough ahead of Benedetti, though, that he's not going to be under any immediate threat here, Devonish, although if he keeps making any of these sorts of mistakes, he may very well end up in the clutches of Benedetti. Now, Hathaway has managed, we've just seen that they're back a shot, he's managed to sneak back past Zach for P4. Boak's still sitting in 6th. But fair exchange between all these drivers at the moment. Good racing, good solid racing. Some of them using the little bit of extra road there out of turn 3. Just the one retirement so far in Glen Miles. That was on lap 6, so only 3 laps ago. At the moment, the 16th place man, Cam Rutledge, who was the unfortunate victim of a drive-through penalty that appears for a jumped start, is well off being lapped at the moment. So he's down at just exited turn 3, and the leader's just coming into turn 1. So should be plenty of gap and should avoid being lapped between now and the end of this race, as Foley has just gone through and set the quickest lap of the race, 1:08.4, 4 tenths off the lap time that he did set in qualifying. And that was a fantastic shot with the helicopter cam just to show the different lines that everyone taking through turn 2. Now Ricky Slick thought about a move on his teammate Brendan Ross there for a moment. Slightly different teams, still under the FCR Motorsport stable, but there is the Team Scrouse stable and the standard FCR Motorsport. We do count them as sort of one team, since they all live in the same Discord. They all talk about the setup together. It's a collaboration between the different entities. Now, Boak's made another mistake, has he? Or is he making a move here? Or did Zach make the mistake? Because that's a little bit of an unusual spot for Boak, and he's locked up again, but somehow manages to hang it round the outside. And Zach a little bit taily there. Let's see if we can pick up what happened. It's a little bit too late for it, but if you just see in front of shot as we're watching Phil Boak here, Zach had a go at Mitchell Hathaway. Oh, Boak got into the back of him a little bit there too. So again, that explains why Zach was a little bit compromised and why Phil Boak has managed to sneak past him. Hathaway still holds down P4 though. A little bit of a dint in that left-hand side door there, just as he rounds turn 3. We can just see. Is Zach going to have another go at Boak, or is he a bit too far back? A bit too far back at the moment. Meanwhile, the margin for Foley is out to, it looks like it's getting close to about 5 seconds at the moment. Just starting to be pegged back a little bit as we wait to see them cross the control line this time around. They're all rounding turn 6. Foley goes through in a 108.5. And Devonish is about 4.7 seconds behind. He did a 109.2. Benedetti behind a 108.8. So the gap between second and third place is very slowly being eroded away. Then it's back to this lot, headed by Hathaway, Boak, then Zach. Brennan Ross only just under a second away from Zach, and half a second ahead of his teammate Ricky Slick. Termo's managed to make his way back inside the top 10, having started P7. And then the HDS car of Billy Dougal Salonga runs in P10, which is one spot down from where he started. Still got Steve Burko running. He's up 3 spots. He's locked in a battle here with Gary Neville. They've been glued together for a couple of laps now. And then back to the first and only one of the Cracker Racing Team cars, a Brownie at the wheel. Cracker not here tonight. Dwayne Davies, the FGX Falcon, the number 55 John Play Special, and then Cam Rutledge has managed to get past Rhodey in the PBF Academy car for second to last and last of the currently classified runners, with Glenn Miles the only retirement so far. With 12 laps on the board and working lap 13 at the minute, this gap has shrunk. So Foley had a very poor lap last time around. It was a 1 minute 11.8. Devonish a 108.9. Aldo Benedetti a 108.8. So the gap has now come back down from the near 5 seconds that it was, back to a more manageable 2.3. Given it's such a short circuit here, and it now goes out to 2.4. Given it's such a short circuit here, the amount of time you can gain on a lap compared to your competitor can be quite small, but when you make a mistake, the amount of time that you can lose to a pursuing car or a car in front of you can be quite significant, as we've just seen for both the men in first and second place. First it was Devonish and now Foley. A little bit of a lock-up from Foley going into turn 1, but much better through 2. Using that's probably about as much exit curb as you dared. Oh, Devonish nearly got a swapper on through turn 2. 2.3 seconds for the moment, now nearly 2.5. So a little bit of a moment for Devonish at turn 2 cost him a couple of tenths. As we go back to this battle for 4th and 5th. Now Boak has managed to clear away. Oh, we had a real moment there, did Phil Boak, off of turn number 3. We'll go and see if we have a look at that on the replay, because that is definitely worth a look again. And we'll go on board with Boak. Just have a listen to this car as it jumps off of turn 3. Just a bit of oversteer on the car there. Didn't sound untoward, just maybe a little bit of a steering input. Turned the car wrong way into the forward direction for a few brief moments. But that has dropped him back from Hathaway for the moment. So he was up there throwing down a bit of a challenge, and he had been catching him up until that point. But that lap time is a second extra. Oh, and Termo's had a moment there off of turn 2, and it's been rounded up by Ricky Slick. So what happened to Termo off of that second corner, because that's allowed the Commodore from Ricky Slick of FCR Team Scrouse down the inside. Well, in actual fact, it looks like Ricky Slick had actually gotten through before that. And yeah, he had. So locked in battle, those two. And now Ricky Slick has cleared out. And Brendan Ross has actually gone through as well. So now, I just saw a little bit of smoke in the background. I was looking to see if it was anybody, but no, it doesn't look like it is. So back to our race leader Foley, who's working lap 16 at the moment. 2.5 seconds the margin. All goes deep though. Goes a little bit deep at turn number 3. Not the first car to do that in this race. Might have been some of the smoke that we saw, a little bit people going deep and a little bit of dirt being kicked up as well. Foley continues on his merry way for the moment. Even with going deep at turn 3, still holds a very impressive 2.7 seconds. He actually managed to gain 0.2 of a second despite the fact he went deep. This will be a good result for Devonish too. This would be his 4th second place of the season if he can hold this down for another 4 laps. He's extended the margin back out over Aldo Benedetti after a scruffy lap in the first half of this race. Hathaway's moved ahead. Now Zach has also gotten back ahead of Phil Boak as well. So a couple of laps ago, Phil Boak was up challenging Mitchell Hathaway. Now he's back behind Zach. So further mistakes for Boak. And having a look at his last lap time across the line, a 1 minute 12.7. And he lost all of it in the first sector. That's what did the damage, a 27.0 first sector for Phil Boak, when normally you're up around the low 24s for an opening sector here at Queensland Raceway. So just a few mistakes starting to creep in for the points leader at the current point of the season. It is a bit difficult as the season is quite long. I guess to maintain your advantage at the top of the standings for such a long time, you become the hunted. And Phil Boak has basically been the hunted for 2/3 of the season. We were talking this man up last round, was on for a potential podium finish in the Townsville race, and unfortunately ended up with engine failure on the run to the last corner. And we remarked that the Iron Man on the bonnet of that car, as you can see from the trackside cameras there, the glow in his little power cell had just gone out at that point in time as the glow in that car went out. Rody, the last man, now being lapped by a man in 5th place, doing the right thing by getting offline. And we look at Zach's times. He's been doing minute 9.4. Hathaway ahead was a minute 9.6 last time around. So the inroads being made not terribly encouraging at the moment. With only 2 and a little bit laps to go, I dare say that this will be where they finish unless there's any further mistakes. Zach just needs to focus on holding off the advances of Phil Boak for 2 more laps. And then it would be a 5th place finish for Zach, which when we look down the standings would be his second 5th place. He's only run a couple of races this season, Zach. A DNF is his first race at Barbagallo. 4th and 5th at Hidden Valley, and then of course the DNF at Townsville. So potentially 3 top 5 finishes out of the 5 races contested. So not a bad way to start your Super 2 campaign, only new to the category this year, having picked up the Super 2 drive about a third of the way through the season. For the moment he's doing a fine job holding down P5, keeping his nose clean. The real closest battle on track at the moment for a little while was between the teammates, the FCR teammates of Ricky Slick and Brendan Ross. Most of the field has really settled down. Oh, is that Boak? That's Boak wide again. So that's another place that he's lost. Was that now breaking into turn number 4? It's on his own, so it certainly looks like it was. This has not been a good race for Phil Boak. We expected he would probably march a couple places. Oh, he got well out of shape there. Was way wide of the racing groove. He just managed to pull it up. Now, he might come under some pressure from Brendan Ross in the back half of this last lap. We'll return to our race leader at the moment on the run up to the very same spot where his teammate just went off about 30 seconds ago, but has controlled the race from pole position. Had an early challenge from Mitchell Hathaway, who was up on the outside and actually got the better of the start. But it'll be Brenton Foley who takes race number 1 tonight here at Queensland Raceway. 150 points in the bank for Foley. Back to Will Devonish with a much-deserved second place for Will. And third place, Aldo Benedetti, the first of the Ford runners home. Back to Mitchell Hathaway in 4th place. Zach comes home for his 5th place points finish of the season. Ricky Slick and Brendan Ross has now managed to get ahead of Phil Boak as well, so not a good race at all for Boak, and you can tell with frustration, Kathunk straight into the wall at the end of turn number 1. Termo and Billy Dougal Salonga rounding out the top 10. Steve Burko about to come home in what is 11th place for him. Second of the FGX Falcons for Top Gear Racing. Ahead of Brownie, the lapped Benjamin Rhodes is in there as well. And Dwayne Davies, I'm not sure if he just ran out of fuel, but he's been rounded up by Cam Rutledge at the line, so I'm not sure if that's a fuel issue there. And Gary Neville, the last of the runners on the lead lap. Rhodey, the only man that finished a lap down. And Brenton Foley rather, celebrates with some burnouts, and some much deserved burnouts there for Foley. A good race win for him. So a good top 3 there. Foley from Devonish, from Aldo Benedetti, back to Mitchell Hathaway for 4th place. And as we said, talking Zach up last round as a potential podium getter. He's doing himself an extremely good job at the wheel of that FGX Falcon, and he might be a dark horse for a podium in the next race. But we will wait and see what that brings us in between now and the next session, as we're starting to be joined by the gentleman who occupied the podium in that last race. So let's go to our first place man. So Brenton Foley, another race win for you on the season. That builds your total up to 6 race wins on the season. And looking at the point standings here, that means it is 4 on the bounce for you. You're starting to make a habit of this.
Yeah, had a couple of tracks in a row that I really work well with and have really enjoyed over the last couple of years. Will kept me honest through that whole one. I made a couple of mistakes here and there, and I really had to make sure I was on top of myself to keep concentrating, things like that. Otherwise, I knew he'd catch me up pretty quickly. But overall, it was a really good race. I was just managing the tyres.
Well, you didn't have it all your own way. You had a bit of a strong threat there from Mitchell Hathaway at the start of the race. He got up on the outside of you and very, very nearly rounded you up around the turn 1 and 2 bends at the beginning of that race. But once you sort of managed to just pop ahead of him at the exit of turn 2, you were never headed. But how'd you go with that start? Because it probably wasn't one of your better ones.
Yeah, I definitely bogged it down and got a little bit too much wheel spin. Sorry, a little bit too much wheel spin than I wanted. And I did see he definitely got the jump on me, but I had the inside line, and it was pretty touch and go. It was a fair bit of understeer, but when I noticed that he probably wasn't going to make the corner, I made sure I kept with it, eased off a little bit, and drove through and managed to get ahead. I knew then that with him wide and everyone trying to pounce on top of him, that if I had really made the most of the next 2 laps, I would have set myself up with a little gap that I just had to manage for the rest of the race, and it worked pretty well.
Well, job well done. You led from start to finish, and we know you haven't been well in the last couple of weeks, but we can tell just from that cough you had there, but won't keep you much longer, but go and get yourself ready for race 2, and job well done.
Thank you.
Second place man, Will Devonish. Will, be happy with that result. Started on the second row of the grid and found yourself on the second step of the podium. Well done.
Yeah, happy with that. Would have been happier if I didn't have a little bit of an off-track midway, but yeah, I felt the car was strong all the way through, so really happy with that result.
Yeah, you weren't the only one to have a couple of offs. I mean, Brenton had a 5-second odd advantage after you did have that off, but then he made his own mistake as well, and that gap sort of halved again. And then it sort of tended to stabilise. It never really, outside of those couple of mistakes, it never really went more than a tenth or two up per lap. So the margins here are quite fine. You can lose a lot of time if you make a mistake, but the times to gain are really insignificant. You're really looking for those 1%ers to try and close those gaps down over a 20-lap race, aren't you?
Oh, 100%. And through this race, second lap, I saw Brenton lock up into T3, and I thought if I keep pushing him and he keeps locking it, I might have a shot to round him up. And I felt I was getting in a good rhythm, but yeah, I just was pushing a bit hard. And yeah, the moment you drop a tyre off the track, you've lost a second, and trying to make that up, it takes another 5 laps.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Well, go and get yourself sorted for qualifying for race 2, and best of luck for the second race this evening.
Thanks, mate.
Now, turning our attention to third place, we've been waiting to get this man in here for a while. Aldo Benedetti, welcome to the podium.
Thank you.
Now, you've been campaigning the Brian Walsh car for the couple of times that you have been in the series. What sort of inspired you to pick up the mantle of his car? He tends to like watching the streams rather than drive his car, I'd imagine. Did he roped you in for to drive his car, or did you volunteer yourself?
Well, it's not so much a Brian. It's more Lewis, the team boss. It's in my contract that if I can make it back from Italy and if I can, get back in time, I have to race. I do not like these cars compared to, say, the European supercars, but yes, I have driven in Brian's car, and yes.
Well, we've noticed you've had sort of some up and down results as you have been getting used to the car, but you tend to. It looks like you've sort of turned a corner tonight. You qualified well, and I guess it's a simple circuit, not sort of like the European circuits that you're probably used to. But does the simplicity of the circuit sort of help with learning the car and being able to become accustomed to the car, or would you prefer sort of the more European type tracks if we had them in this country?
Well, I'd probably prefer the more European style circuits, but the short nature of the circuit certainly helped. I was able to do some testing, but I had to fly back to Italy and then fly back, so I'm a little bit jet lagged, a little bit tired, and the first half of the race was a bit difficult. But once I got into a groove, it's not too bad. But yes, the left-hand side tyres did like to slide a lot.
Well, we did say the left-hand side of the car is the working side here at Queensland Raceway, and you definitely have you've put those left-hand side tyres to good use. You're on the podium for the first time in AMS Super 2, so congratulations, and let's see what you can do in race number 2 this evening.
Yes, hopefully I don't get. Hopefully I can get away cleanly, and I can battle for the front 2.
Well, we certainly hope that would make a very, very interesting race. So thank you to our 3 podium getters in race number 1 this evening. We'll take a short break, and we'll be back in a few moments with qualifying for the second race of this evening. Don't go anywhere. back at Queensland Raceway for round 9. Second race of the night about to get underway in about 20 minutes from now. But between now and then, we have a second qualifying session for the second sprint race of the night. I'm just waiting on the server side to get themselves sorted, the cars to be ready in the pit garages, and then we will have another 15 minutes on the clock for another 15-minute qualifying session. Another 4 laps on the board for our drivers, as we can take you to our live pictures now. Cars starting to organise themselves on track. A little bit of an issue with the track this evening. It takes a little bit longer for some of the vehicles to load in, which is a bit unfortunate. It just means we have to wait a couple of moments extra before things get underway. Just a quick recap of the top 3 from the first race of the evening. Brenton Foley, Will Devonish and Aldo Benedetti making his first trip to the rostrum this season. His other races that he has competed in, 4th at Townsville and 5th at the first race at Winton. And judging by the voice, points for those watching on the live chat, on the live stream, as to who Aldo Benedetti might be. We've speculated for a while, but I think that may have just given it away. Green flag and green light for qualifying 2 for race 2 this evening. First man out is Zach. Coming out along with him, Rhodey, Termo, Glenn Miles, just exiting the lane at the moment. Again, all just finding a little bit of space. And this man threw down a pretty serious challenge in qualifying 1. Unfortunately, it didn't come to be for him, but I dare say he potentially could sneak onto the podium here. I don't like to put the moz on people, but he's got the pace to do it. He's going to be the first man that sets the benchmark. Now, who else is coming out at the moment? Gary Neville's joined the crew of drivers that are out on track. And surprisingly, Brenton Foley has decided to stay in the pit garage for the time being. He went out very early in the last session and it paid off for him. He's decided to stay stationary for the moment. Now, interesting to note, with Foley's 4th first place in a row and his 6th of the season, to Phil Boak's 8th place in that race, the points deficit from 1st to 2nd has come down from 114 to 54 points. So if that's the same sort of finish that Boak and Foley have in this second race tonight, we'll have a new points leader at the top of the standings by the end of the night. We certainly don't wish that. We want it to be nice and close, but there is a real possibility that may occur. And just talking again about points finishes, we did say at the beginning of the night there was a big log jam between the gentleman who was in 5th place, which was Cam Rutledge at the time, all the way down to the man in 9th place, which is Ricky Slick, and that there was 66 points between those guys. And you can actually see with some of the points finishes that happened tonight, those margins have really shifted. So Cam Rutledge has lost some of his advantage. In actual fact, Brendan Ross has moved ahead of Termo. Steve Burko has now dropped behind Ricky Slick. So just with those points finishes that happened in that first race, those places have really jumped around rather quickly. Zach fires the opening salvo, a minute 9.264, and he'll go again. Termo actually was on a slightly quicker lap through Sector 1, waiting for him to trigger the Sector 2 timing split. A little bit less than what it is. Rhodey comes up with a minute 11.7. Termo was purple in Sector 1. He was purple. Zach was purple in 2 and 3. It now goes purple in Sector 1 to Zach with 24.1. We did see some drivers down into the low to mid 23s. And Termo comes up with an effort a half a second shy of Zach. Sector 2 timing split will come up for the number 30 now. And it's not purple. It's a 22.5 in the middle sector. Still tracking to go into the minute 8s if he can get this final corner right. Again, the different lines that everybody takes. Searching for those, we said those 1%ers. He goes into the 8s, a minute 8.989, just into the minute 8s. Mitchell Hathaway's first effort is a minute 9.456. It jumps ahead of Termo and commences his second flying lap. We'll get a Sector 2 split for him right now. Up on his own PB, slightly down on Zach's time. And this is what we saw in qualifying 1. Everybody that was chasing Foley's time was doing pretty well to the Sector 2 timing split, and then they couldn't quite get the job done. They couldn't go on with it in that final sector, which essentially is just 2 corners and 2 straights. Hathaway improves his time, but not enough. In actual fact, Termo had snuck back ahead of him before that was out as well. So at the moment, provisionally, Zach from Termo from Mitch Hathaway. Gary Neville has just been passed by Brownie as Dwayne Davies starting his first flying lap. Gary Neville's still got one more. Burko, Rutledge, and Davies are currently out on circuit as we're following the 55 of Dwayne Davies round turn 2. Again, using just about as much curb as you dare through turn 2, otherwise you're going to put 2 wheels on the grass. Bank a lap to begin with, I guess, and nearly 9/10 down at the Sector 1 split on the current provisional pole sitting time. As Billy Dougal-Salonga joins the list of cars currently out on circuit, having just exited the lane and rounding turn 2. To stay with DD for the balance of his lap. A little bit of curb there. Some drivers again taking a little bit of curb on the inside. That curbs on the inside at turns 4 and 5 are a little bit more pronounced and a bit more raised than a lot of the other curbs, which tend to be a bit flatter. So you can get the car up on 2 wheels. Opening lap for DD is a 1:10.399, just shy of a 10.4. Steve Burko's first effort puts him in 5th, just behind Dwayne Davies, and in actual fact, he's done. He must have made a mistake somewhere on his second lap at Sector 2. You can see the timing there is frozen at 47.6. Cam Rutledge's first effort yields him P6. This is a man that'll be looking for a definite improve on his last lap, and he was quite conservative there through turn number 2. Didn't use all the exit road at all. Has he aborted this lap? Yes, he has, I think. He's miles off the pace, so perhaps a little mistake through the first couple of corners has scuppered any chance of him improving his time. We're currently provisionally P6 as we look to try and pick up Billy Dougal-Salonga. He's out of turn 3, just behind Rutledge on the road. 7 minutes 50 remaining. And Dwayne Davies is still pressing on with his next effort. What's he got in store? He's about to cross the line now. And no further improvement from Dwayne Davies. As a BDS teammate to Mitchell Hathaway on his way to and through the final corner. The only man currently on the circuit. Everyone else in the garage. BDS's first effort's a 9.8. 8.5 tenths off the pole time, but currently on the same row as his teammate, although nearly 7.5 tenths behind the time that his teammate has set. Has he got any more improvement on this second flying lap? Well, he has got some improvement. He's halved the deficit to the provisional pole time at the first sector split. Really slid the car up to the curb there as well through turn 3. Second timing intermediate about to come up. Lost a little bit more time, so he's up on his PB now, so He lost about a tenth and a bit in that short shoot from turn 3 to turn 4 and through the second timing intermediate. So it may be an improve still if he can find a bit of time off the corner, and pretty much stayed where he was in terms of his deficit relative to his own PB. So improves by a tenth and a little bit, and now we start to see the masses starting to come out. So here's the FCR pair. They tend to go out together. Brendan Ross and Ricky Slick. And Will Devonish was just waiting at the pit lane for PDS to come around and finish his lap before getting out. He wasn't sure, obviously. Oh, he's gone deep, so that's not good for the preparation of this lap for Will Devonish. Now, a number of the drivers tend to have the stream up so they can see if they're on broadcast themselves. I would tend to argue that that's not a good idea, and I hope Will's not one of those people. I can name a few of the drivers in this field off the top of my head that have been a victim of watching themselves on the stream at some point in time, but I'm not going to, because I don't want to put the moz on them. As we now see, Brenton Foley has decided the time is right to come out onto the circuit and set his qualifying laps. Oh, Brendan Ross with a huge slide and oversteer off the final corner, which will really hurt his pace down the front straight for his opening lap. Here's a really good angle of the kind of line that Devonish takes through turn 2. A little bit offline through and a bit scrappy through turn 1. 1.6 tenths down on Zach's current time of a minute 8.989. Now the track, having been reset between race 1 and the second qualifying session, will mean that a little bit of the track grip has been lost, so we don't expect the lap times to be as high as they were, or sorry, as good as they were in qualifying 1. If you remember, the benchmark time was a minute 8.088 from Brenton Foley that everybody was trying to chase for the majority of that first qualifying session this evening. The Devonish goes to the top, minute 8.883. Behind him, Brendan Ross comes up with P5 on his opening flying lap. Ricky Slick can only manage P12. Aldo Benedetti has now made his way out onto the circuit. He's just ahead of Devonish here. Devonish not close enough to get any form of a tow down this straight here to help his cause. What's he got this time around? Oh, 3.5 tenths. That's a huge gain for Will Devonish. It was much better through turn 1 that time around. That's where he lost most of his lap time the previous lap, but also not having enough time to prepare the car properly on his outlap too. Going off at turn 3 on the outlap didn't help. It's gone deep there at turn number 4 though. He's lost a bit of that advantage though, so it's gone from 3.5 tenths to 1.5 tenths up. Benedetti does the right thing, gets out of the way. Now where's Brenton Foley on track? He's just coming out of turn, and he's just set himself a time now of 4th place. It's his best, as Phil Boker's currently on a lap 2. Devonish stays at a 10.5 improvement on his lap time, but he was tracking to be in the mid 108s then. He could have had probably a minute 8.5 on the board had he have not gone deep at turn number 4. We turn to our race 1 winner, Brenton Foley, up on his own time, not by very much, but still nearly 3 tenths behind the current provisional pole time of Will Devonish. And Phil Boker's gone through to start his first flying lap as well. Him and Aldo Benedetti, the last of the runners yet to set any form of a lap time. This is Foley's last attempt. 17 hundredths is the gap from his current slot in P4 to P1. Looking good enough to jump Termo and possibly jump Zach. He did put a foot on the outside of the curb there, found a bit more time, goes to the front row. Not enough to dislodge Will Devonish for the moment. Here's Benedetti through the final corner. He was hoping to try and get a good qualifying in. Current opening lap for him is only yielding P7. Where is the current points leader? On the run down to the final corner. He locks up again. He's had some trouble there tonight. But he needs a good drive off. I think he's going to have to just bank this lap and go again. P3. We managed to find a little bit of time there despite the lockup. So it's Devonish from Foley from Boak. The only men that can improve are Benedetti and Boak. Benedetti with a purple first sector, 23.963. Where is he on track at the moment? Here he is. Currently P8. Obviously he was P7 after his opening lap. Boak dislodged him. And he's got time. He's got nearly 0.2 of a second in hand over Will Devonish at the moment. And a huge margin up on his own PB. So looking set, I would hazard a guess, if he can keep this together, this could be the first pole position for Ford in this season. And provisionally it currently is. 1:08.575 for Aldo Benedetti. The question now turns to the points leader, Phil Boak. What's he got in store? What's he done so far? 24.0 to the first sector, 22.6 for the middle sector. That's not going to be good enough. That is probably going to be enough just maybe if he can dislodge Devonish. But no, he can't go any further. And it's a pole for Ford for the first time this season. Aldo Benedetti's the man who delivers it for Scuderia Alitalia. And a fantastic last-ditch effort. 1:08.575, a tenth and a half clear of Devonish. And how costly was that little mistake at turn 4 for Will Devonish? Went from being 3.5 tenths up on his own time to 1.5 tenths up, which he maintained throughout the lap. So, as we said several times in this broadcast, those little 1%ers can make or break your race or your qualifying. And in this case, that little 1%er has cost Devonish pole. Nonetheless, he's on the front row. And it's an all PBF second row, but great job, Aldo Benedetti. Pole position for race number 2 tonight. Wowee. So, great to have another pole sitter for a change in AMS Oz Super 2. Benedetti, Devonish, Foley, Boak, Zach and Turmo. Turmo with another strong qualifying session in P6. Hathaway, Ross, Ricky Slick and Billy Dougal Salonga rounding out the top 10. And we're getting some word there was it looks like there's been a bit of trouble down at the PBF race engineering garage too. Half the reason Brenton Foley set the time that he did is they didn't strip all the fuel out for that particular qualifying session. So in actual fact did 2 laps on a full tank of fuel. So to get as far up the grid as he did with a full tank of fuel is certainly a very, very good effort. And if that's the kind of race pace you can expect on a full tank of fuel, then watch out. Foley's definitely going to be one to march up the order in this particular race. He's halved that points deficit that he had, as we said a few moments ago, to Phil Boak. Now 54 points is the gap. And still plenty of racing left in the season. So by the end of this second race, as we said at the beginning of the show, we will have completed 14 of the 21 allocated races for the season. And at the moment, the PBF pair continue to head the standings. And Devonish is doing his best to keep up. And we have a look at the top 3. Boak on 2,016 points, back to Foley 1962. And the second place for Devonish definitely helped his cause, helped him close in on Boak. He's now moved along to 1,788. So he's 174 points behind Boak. But he's 120 behind Foley. So by no means is Devonish out of this championship fight. And starting off the front row of the grid if he can hold off the PBF pair behind, he's going to continue to tighten that margin. The real interesting bit's going to see about how Phil Boak handles this second race. Going to start from the same spot where he started the last race. He started out of the second row, but he went backwards and finished P8 by the flag. So we'll be waiting to see how he can bounce back, or if he can bounce back and finish ahead of Foley, because he's been losing points hand over fist. If we have a look at the last half a dozen races or so, Townsville, Boak finished third to Foley's first, and Hidden Valley was a real big breaker for Boak. In both races, race 1 was a DNF, race 2 was 6th, and Foley won both those races. In Winton, a second and a third to Foley's 6th and 2nd, so it went in favour of Boak at the Winton round. It was after that it's really started to go wrong. So the last 4 races, he's been outscored on his team by his teammate by a huge chunk of points, and the big killer there, the non-finish at the first race at Hidden Valley, which was race 10 of the season. Well, what we'll do again for a few moments is take a short break, and we'll be back with race number 2 of round 9 of AMSL's Super 2 in a few moments. Welcome back trackside, ladies and gentlemen. You are watching AMS Oz Super 2 action from Queensland Raceway, the 9th round of a 15-round calendar for this season. Just been informed that there's a little bit of a longer warm-up this time around. We did have a 5-minute warm-up in the previous race between quali and race 1. We've been informed it's going to run the full 10-minute distance for warm-up for race 2 this evening. So a little bit of a lull, only a handful of drivers currently out there on the track, but while those drivers are currently out there on the track, a general reminder, don't forget about the ARW 3 Hours of Suzuka coming up on September 15, 2019. The Metal Morrow AJR cars around the fabulous Suzuka Grand Prix circuit. So fast, high downforce cars, endurance style format, 3 hours. It is a multi-driver event, so you do need to find a partner. There are a couple of drivers that still want to race but haven't got anybody to race with, so don't forget to just sign up there if you follow that URL in the top left hand corner, tinyurl.com/ARW Suzuka. There have been a couple of the servers put up in the last few weeks for testing and to allow drivers to come up and see how the cars feel, and there are going to be the templates for the liveries to be distributed out probably in the next couple of weeks, and then they'll be looking for some more organised practice sessions. So still plenty of time to get your entry in for the second annual ARW Endurance event coming up. Hard to believe, in about 6 or 7 weeks. It's this year is absolutely flying, so looking forward to that. Well, for the moment, we've only got about half a dozen cars just on the track, just going through the warm-up phase, or taking advantage of the warm-up phase with about 3 minutes left to go. We're hearing a little bit of word on the wire down out of the PBF racing garage. Well, we already had word that they'd had a bit of a mishap with the fuel, left too much fuel in the car for qualifying, and they're a bit worried that the car might not be the best car to pass. So if that's the case, he's really looking for a car. They've really tuned the car for a car that runs best in clear air, and that's sort of been the theme for Foley. When he's been in clear air, he really seems to clear away, but when it comes to passing, maybe locking up under brakes or not having a car that can go the full required depth into the braking zone could be an Achilles heel. But he's starting out of the third place position is Foley, and he's got Benedetti and the Commodore of Will Devonish to pass in this next 20 lap race. So 2 minutes currently on the clock, and speak of the devil, as we resume live pitches, Brenton Foley out there seeing what sort of laps he can generate with this car that they're worried is not the best car to affect a pass, not to be passed, but to affect a pass on a competitor. And we will soon find out in a few moments' time what this car has in store. It's currently turning laps in the minute 10s, but not very much rubber laid down between sessions, of course. The track grip gets a little bit reset between sessions. It does lose a little bit of the grip, so a lot of the grip tends to build up during the practice session, then carries through to qualifying, carries through to race, but then with the reset between race 1 and qualifying 2, the track grip does tend to lose a little bit of its bite. Looking through the list as well, it's been good to see that there have been a few people who have been able to strike up a couple of podium finishes this year outside of the usual protagonists. So the majority of the podiums this year have gone to Phil Boak, Brenton Foley, Will Devonish. There's been 3 for Mitchell Hathaway. Brendan Ross has snagged 4, and then of course JP Courier had those 3 wins in a row from Barbagallo in both Winton races as well, as it looks like Foley might be coming up to do a practice race start, and indeed he is, which is something that's very, very common in ARW, as you've seen if you follow the broadcast from Stairs and Matt Dunlop for the ARW DRMs as we cycle through the field, and there's no one currently out there on the circuit. You've seen that that's one thing the ARW boys tend to do quite a lot of during the warm-up session is the practice starts, making sure that everybody can get away cleanly, they know how the cars behave, and good general start line practices. There can be quite a few incidents off the start incidents at all types of circuits and all types of race cars, but thankfully we haven't seen too many start line incidents here in AMS Oz. Now this is the phase of the night where we just have to wait a little bit for cars to sort themselves out and for the game to sort itself out, as it does take a little bit extra time than we're used to seeing for the cars to form up on the grid. We're not 100% sure why, but that just tends to be the way that it is tonight. We're not sure if it's a track specific thing or if it's something to do with the mod or that itself, but nonetheless, looks like cars are forming up, and indeed they are. 17 cars still with us tonight. Again, good turnout. Usually numbering somewhere between 7 and 20 cars in Super 2, so always a strong turnout. Speaking of strong turnouts, if you haven't got your entry in for AMS Oz TCC on Monday nights, the new series is going to be coming up starting this month or later this month, you better get it in, because there's a grid of over 20 cars. I think it's up to 21 at last count, ready to strike and battle it out over that awesome looking calendar that Lewis Wedding's been putting together. So get your entry in for TCC. Also for the return of GT3 on Sunday nights, that's coming up in the not too distant future as well. But for the moment, we've got another 20 laps in AMS Oz Super 2. And on the pole, the first pole for Ford this season. Aldo Benedetti breaks the General's Men stranglehold on pole position, which is great to see. Will Devonish, front row start for him. He started on the second row last race, finished second. He'll be looking to go one better. Hopefully he can battle with Aldo Benedetti. Their car pace is pretty similar. It's an all PBF second row of the grid. Title protagonists, Brenton Foley, P3, Phil Boak, P4. He needs a good drive in this race for sure. Then back to Zach in P5. So 2 Falcons inside the top 5 positions. Termo, again, another good strong qualifying result from the man at the helm of the 715 Nissan Altima, the Castrol racing car. Mitchell Hathaway again leads the 2 HDS cars in terms of head-to-head qualifying at a 7th place this time, having started on the front row last time around. Can he march forward? Brendan Ross and Ricky Slick have swapped places from their qualifying in race number 1, 8th and 9th respectively, and BDS rounding out the top 10, having started, or actually sorry, having finished in 10th place in the last race. Dwayne Davies 11th place. Steve Burko rounds out the Falcon Brigade. Cam Rutledge started 13th in the last race. Starts out at P13 again. They'll look to make sure he doesn't jump the start this time. Then back to Brownie, the Cracker Racing Team car, the Penrite ZB Commodore. Gary Neville, Rhodey, Glenn Miles bringing up the rear. Again, relatively quick form up from everybody. Devonish pointing his car towards Aldo Benedetti already. Not something we see very often here in Super 2, but that signals a little bit of intention, I would imagine. And maybe 1 or 2 people just not quite lined up in the box for this start. Countdown sequence is on. 20 more laps ahead of us at Queensland Raceway. Away we go. Great launch by Will Devonish. He really got a good launch off of P2 there. Left Aldo Benedetti in the dust, who's now going to be in a PBF sandwich into turn number 1. Zach going round the outside there. Who's that going around the outside of? That's around the outside of Brenton Foley. So Foley's gone backwards. Phil Boak's moved up into P2. Benedetti with a poor start. Zach moves up in the Mother Falcon into 4th place, but a great launch from Will Devonish out of P2. Minimised the wheel spin to perfection, and he leads Boak, Benedetti. Oh, Hathaway's come from a long way back and really clattered into a number of drivers there down there at turn 3, sent them scattering like bowling pins. Let's pick that up on replay because he came from a long way back. Here it is. Went down the inside of Foley, Actually, Foley got into the back of Zach, and he went off, so that's why Foley was in the grass, and Hathaway was down the inside. So Zach didn't lose a place out of all that, despite getting hip and shouldered out the way. Just lost a bit of ground. Back to live pitches now, as Hathaway recovering from that, now challenging Turmo, who's moved up the field here. Turmo leaves him some space on the inside at turn 1. Foley now been shuffled all the way back to 8th. He's behind Brendan Ross here. And Rossi will have his elbows out. He won't want to let Foley pass. He'll defend for all it's worth. As Hathaway gets a good run off of turn 2, he's got overlap. In actual fact, Foley got a really good run off of turn 2 as well. Turmo goes deep and says, I can hang with you. Oh, no, I can't. Foley's gone deep as well. Second time Foley's gone deep at turn 3. That's a huge moment for Foley. He's going to have to be ultra careful now. So turn 3, the action spot. He'd just gotten past Brendan Ross, and the car wouldn't stop. So Turmo had outbraked himself. He was the innocent victim in that one. Thankfully, the collision didn't send Turmo further off into the grass. But Turmo had outbraked himself. Thankfully, he was away from Mitchell Hathaway. And then Foley came along and left a big dint in Turmo's right-hand door. Return again now to live pitches. Foley back in 10th. Turmo 9th. Billy Dougal Salonga there in 8th. Hathaway still hanging on to 5th, so that up there for HDS Racing. Foley did say he wasn't sure about the passing type of car that he had. Yellow flag now down here at turn 3. So who's gone off this time? Oh, that's Will Devonish. What's happened to Devonish? That is huge. He was leading this race, and it now hands that race over to Phil Boak. Boak had gotten past. Oh, he got a tap from Benedetti as well. Oh, dearie me. I've got a funny feeling, and he had to wait. Oh, he was about to come back onto track 2. Thought better of it. Very, very late bit there. So something had happened to Devonish during that run down to turn 2. So he'd made a mistake somewhere. Phil Boak had managed to get past, and then Benedetti punted him off the road. So there may very well be a penalty coming for the Italian after that little exchange. And because he's so far ahead, he can't redress. And now sides down the inside, it's Benedetti, and he outbrakes himself as well. What on earth is going on at turn 3? It seems to be the misjudgment breaking point of the whole entire season. There's been at least half a dozen cars go off there in the opening 3.5 laps of this race, and that now surrenders third place to Mitchell Hathaway. So it's all happening. Brendan Ross is coming through the field as a result of all these offs down at turn 3. So this race has now been completely turned on its head. The order well and truly mixed up. And have a look who's currently in the second spot on the podium. It's Zach for Top Gear Racing. So Falcon's still representing in the top 3 at the moment, and the fastest lap that time around, a 109.4, and he's only 0.7 of a second back of Phil Boak at the moment. Back to this battle over third place as Devonish reclaims the fastest lap. Benedetti moves back past Mitchell Hathaway for P3, but a big cloud hanging over his head. Much better on the brakes here. Zach has gotten past Phil Boak with a wonderful move. It appears down at turn 3. Can he out-drag him and hold him off and position in the defence for turn 4? Yes, he can. How did he get that move done? He got it done in the braking zone at turn 3. And went a little bit deep, left enough space there for Boak, and held on to the position. Great job. Superb pass. So he's got a car that can pass, but now on the switchback in the over and under, Boak reclaims first place. So 5 laps down, 15 to go, and already a great exchange brewing out in front between Boak and Zach. Benedetti has closed this gap down and in a big hurry too. Hathaway going with him. Brendan Ross is hanging on to this battle, and look at the train behind. Billy Dougal Salong has now managed to get ahead of Ricky Slick and Termo, and Foley's dropped outside the top 10 now, so this is really hurting his championship charge against his teammate Phil Boak, and in actual fact Devonish really closing in on him now, as well as Foley got damage that he's living with. We'll find out a bit later on. All 17 runners still in this race, but this is the action pack at the moment. First, second and third. Zach now down the inside, turn 6, gets past. That was clean. Boak tried to turn in when Zach was there. That was an opportunistic pass. Job done for the Falcon driver, but Boak won't have any of it. He's got some overlap just over the rear quarter. Zach knows he's there and leaves the space at turn 1. Plenty of space. Good driving. Now he's clean at turn 2. But Benedetti's going to stick his nose in here on Boak at turn 2, and he's going to have an overlap, and now it's a drag race down the back straight, as we call it. Well, there's several straights. This one's the longest, so we'll call it the back straight down to turn 3. They switch sides, and Boak goes defensive. All the meantime, oh, there's a touch, and Benedetti's been sent Boak around, or nearly around. So that's 2. 2 comings together has Aldo Benedetti had with Phil Boak, and he surrenders 5th place. Now that one I don't think was entirely his fault. We're going to go back and have a look at this from Phil Boak again. Oh, I might argue that might actually be on Phil Boak there. It looked like the rear end was coming around. I don't think he got a tap from Benedetti that time around. I think he might have just been in the wrong place at the wrong time, Aldo Benedetti, to call that. I don't think that was a push at all. I think that was the rear end coming around on the 015 car. So this race is not going according to plan for PBF Race Engineering. Boak is ahead of his teammate Foley, who's now snuck back into the top 10 ahead of Gary Neville. Boak still on track ahead of Foley means that he will extend his points advantage over his teammate in the race for the championship. BDS has moved up into 6th place ahead of Ricky Slick, ahead of Termo, so this is a good little battle pack forming here too. Dwayne Davies is doing great to try and stay with these 3, and the recovering Brenton Foley has now dropped Will Devonish by about 2 seconds, as Devonish has made his way back past Gary Neville as part of his recovery drive. Wow, everywhere we look there's a battle going on up and down the field, and then a bit further down the order too we come back to the likes of Steve Burko just staying ahead of Brownie as Benedetti sets the fastest lap of the race. Into the minute 8s we go, minute 8.5, sort of on par with the qualifying times, as there's a move here. Cam Rutledge passed by Brownie at the final corner. ZB Commodore on ZB Commodore. At least Cam managed to get off the line this time around without attracting a drive-through penalty. And look to try and get back underneath the Cracker Racing Team car. He's a bit far back at this point in time. Oh, and there's a bit of a touch here. We just caught it just to come back to the battle at the very, very last second, and that's allowed Hathaway through. A little bit hip and shoulder there, and Zach has lost 2 places in the blink of an eye. But Benedetti was closing on him now. Benedetti had just set the fastest lap of the race that time around. Replay here. Zach going defensive, and did he allow enough space? Oh, that is a little bit of an interesting look. We'll have to wait and see what the stewards say about that one. That's a really interesting case. But Hathaway managed to sneak through as well. And now Zach has got a rear mirror full of Brendan Ross's Commodore, the 444 car, behind. Wow, what an action-packed first 9 laps of this race. Benedetti holds first place down from Mitchell Hathaway. Zach third, Brendan Ross not giving up hope here. Phil Boak now in 5th. Now Ricky Slick has now also moved ahead of Billy Douglas Salonga, so that's 2 FCR cars in the top 6. Turmo back to 8th. Foley and Devonish rounding out the 10 as we go on board with Brendan Ross in his pursuit of Zach over the final step on the podium. So round turn 6 and onto this front straight. Let's have a look at the lap times as they come across the line this time around. So Brendan Ross done a minute 9.685. Benedetti a minute 9.0. Hathaway minute 8.9. Zach a minute 9.2. A little bit wide of the apex there at 2, but then going for that late apex was Brendan Ross. He's not close enough to pick up the toe from Zach down here. Now braking marker, the 150 board. Oh, big out braking manoeuvre there from Mitchell Hathaway. Now, did he get into the side of Aldo Benedetti there? We'll see if we can pick that up, because we did see the smoke, but we have another leader in this race. You did say the drivers might have their elbows out. He's alongside there. He did lock up, but no contact. So fair pass. And Benedetti left him some space. So good job. Zach now gets on back onto the rear end of Aldo Benedetti on this lap. Hathaway minute 9.1 that time around. What an exchange. Brendan Ross a little bit wide in the background too. That's not going to help him in his pursuit here. Oh, Mitchell Hathaway's wide as well. He's going to be out in the weeds. 2 wheels on the grass. That's given an incentive to Benedetti. Right under the rear wing now of the ZB Commodore. And now returns the passing favour. Oh, or does he? Down at turn 3. Zach thought about sticking his nose in there as well. Not quite close enough. Backed out of it at precisely the right moment. But Benedetti takes over the lead of this race again. So another lead change. So we've had 6 or so lead changes in the opening 12 laps of this race. And the top 4 locked together. Just over 1.2 seconds separates the top 4. And they're all in the same shot there. Falcon, Commodore, Falcon, Commodore. Then back to Phil Boak. I think he's just trying to bring it home here. Foley's now moved into P6. Devonish to 7th. That puts Billy Douglas Salonga's back ahead of Ricky Slick and Dwayne Davies now. So, and Termo's dropped outside the top 10. So there's been a few other positions shuffled about down the order. We've been focusing in on this battle a lot because this is where the real action's been. Benedetti already going defensive, trying to break the slipstream down this straight. There's Foley in the back of shot, exiting turn 2. Has he got enough time to join this battle? Can he string some laps together? These guys are doing low and mid 1 minute 9s. Foley last time around was a minute 8.7. His teammate was a minute 8.9. So they are chipping away at this leading group of 4. But they're going to need to rely on these guys to trip over themselves a bit more and slow each other down if they're going to close in and have any shot of taking the win. Recovering PBF cars 4th and 5th place. We have lost Rhodey unfortunately from this race. We lost him back on lap 10 and he's very quickly dusted off the overalls and put on the street clothes, and he joins me up here in the commentary box now. Rhodey, fill us in on what happened with your DNF there, mate.
It was a simple little thing. All it was I was getting the pace I was really looking for towards the mid part of that session. I was getting down to the 1 minute ends, I think, for 1 lap there, which was good because I was able to keep pace with people like Brownie and Cam Rutledge. We couldn't actually catch them once I'd had a mistake, and I was starting to get the speed up. But I was just making little mistakes here and there, and all it was simply I got a wheel on the grass and spun out, and then just kept doing donuts because the thing didn't want to get any grip. And I could see myself getting back on track eventually, but being too annoyed with it and sending it into the fence at some point down the line. So I figured I need to save my sanity here, so I decided to put it in shed. I've got the speed here, and it's the best race weekend I've had since I think Albert Park's the last time I was actually racing with cars. But feels good to actually be on pace with other cars for a change.
Well, certainly does feel good to be on pace with other cars. I can be a testament to that feeling. And we're seeing another exchange here on screen. Billy Dougal-Salonga making a mistake down there at turn 4, and Ricky Slick down the outside, or he's on the inside at 5, looking at the outside at 6, now looking for the cutback and the over and under at turn 6, and he's going to have overlap here, and then we'll have the racing, or we'll have the high ground and command a bit of track space on the inside here at turn 1. But BDS tries to go deep and around the outside, and he manages to hang on to it. So that's a great job there from BDS to hold off Ricky Slick. And Dwayne Davies, good to see him inside the top 10. But what do you make of this battle out in front? We're going back to it here now, Rhodey, because this has been a scintillating back and forth between Benedetti, Hathaway, Zach, and Brendan Ross is just keeping watching brief here. Now, mind you, Aldo Benedetti's got a bit of a cloud over his head, or a question mark over his head for putting someone off the road down at turn 3. So we're going to let the stewards sort that one out. But great to see a cracking battle on a track that's it probably tends itself to be a real action track.
It is, yeah. It's on the face of it, very simple tracks, turns and all that. But as we've been talking about in the race chat with the drivers, it's a very easy track to get an idea of how to run it, but it's actually a very hard track to master. Same problems I was having. Someone's just spun off front of actually Glenn Miles.
Yeah, it's Glenn Miles. He's just gone off
of turn 2.
Yeah, looked like he had a bit of smoke. There was yellow flags there at turn 2 for a brief moment, but then off the exit at turn 2, Mitchell Hathaway had a moment. Is that the opportunity that Zach needs to size down the inside at turn 3? Is he close enough? Closing. No, he's not.
No, he was close there, but he's come on very well with his pace, Zach, but he's also got a very mature head on those shoulders. He's not going to go and send it for a move that isn't going to work. So he's biding his time. He's still got 4 laps left in this race to make a move. And all he has to wait for is, if Hathaway's struggling on these tyres, he needs to wait for another mistake, because this track torches tyres, especially your left side tyres with all the right-hand turns. And you're down to sort of 15, 20, 25% tyre wear towards the end of this race. Here he goes.
Down the outside. Hathaway has the high ground, but can he hang with him on the marbles? He's on the dirty side of the track here at Zach, and you can see the rear end of the car wanted to step away there. He couldn't live with it. And as you said, those left-hand side tyres really copping a pounding here, especially through these 2 turns right here. Very high loads through turns 1 and 2 as Foley goes into the minute 8.5s to set a new quickest lap of the race in 6th place. Yeah, turns 1 and 2, the real high loads. 3 and 6, the other 2 left-hand corners on the circuit. 3 they're approaching now. They get a bit of respite through turn 4 and 5. Here goes Zach down the inside. Can he get it stopped? No, he can't. He's gone off into the grass, and he's going to surrender. 3rd place, is he, to Brendan Russell? Can he hang on to it? It's a drag race down this chute to turn 4. Brendan Ross is ahead. Phil Boakes saying, oh, hello, I'm going to get 4th place back.
Oh yeah, it's really close now. He's right up on the bumper of Brendan Ross. He showed he had the pace already, but yeah, he's made a mistake. And one thing he's going to do, especially with a slide off like that, make sure the tyres, he hasn't shorted the tyres any more than he needs to. So he's got to watch the tyres for a little bit. Yeah, it's going to be a case where his car's set up though. It seems that he's lacking some of the pace through turns 1 and 2, so maybe it's set up for more of a speed setup. But he is obviously a lot better, or at least he feels a lot better under brakes than the guys around him. So that's probably where he's going to try and make his moves.
Yeah, well, Brendan Foley, as we've seen, had a few issues with passing cars, and he did say, rumours were coming out of the PBF garage, that he didn't have a car that he felt was probably a best car for passing people. But he's managed to make up some spots from when he went backwards. Outside the top 10 he was at one stage. He's back inside the 10 there. He is just in back a shot. As Zach has another go, passing down to turn 3. Now that's a bit of a better job. Much better job. He gets through, but then Brendan Ross has gone on the crossback. Oh, look at all sorts of opposite lock. All sorts of fistfuls of opposite lock for Zach. He's managed to hang on to it. Side by side, he will command the inside line here at 4. And hangs on. Brendan Ross got all crossed up on the curb.
Yeah,
and now he's wide, and that... I was about to say, I thought Boak might have been right there to try and snaffle 4th place away. He's having a serious look at him now, is Phil Boak. But that slide for Brendan Ross at turn 4 was very, very untimely, as it's put him right under pressure from the 0-1-5.
It has. It's almost dropped him. He's probably not too far off dropping out of the slipstream of Zach either, which is does play effect down these straights. But conversely, Phil Boak right on his bumper now. You can actually just see Foley in the back of the shot. I doubt he's going to catch these guys in time, but he's done a great job recovering from his early off.
Yeah, he certainly has. He had a really, really scruffy opening couple of laps, did Phil Boak. And now down the inside, he had a bit of a look, showed the nose on Brendan Ross, who's probably in need of a good result. Brendan Ross, he's had a 7th at DNF and a 9th have been the last 3 results for him. So a 4th place for him, who's currently 7th in the championship. Actually was 7th, he was 6th after race 1 as a result of being ahead of Turmo. But his next target was Cam Rutledge, so where he's going to finish right now, Brendan Ross, will be enough to take him ahead of Cam Rutledge up into 5th place overall, as Boak goes deep for the umpteenth time at turn 6, and Foley. So Foley probably just did that in sympathy, I would say, seeing his teammate go off. As we're on the last lap now, Aldo Benedetti 1.7 seconds clear, so set to be a pair of podiums for Benedetti, although, as we've said a couple of times now, question mark over his head for what happened down at turn 3 earlier on in the race. Hathaway 2nd, Zach 3rd. Brendan Ross now having another go at defending from Phil Boak, but Boak's got room on the inside here, but outbreaks himself, goes deep, over and under. Beautifully done, Brendan Ross. Snatches that position back, and a big slide off of turn 3. Not the first time that we've seen drivers sliding off of turn 3 this weekend, but hopefully he's going to be able to defend that place. Let's pick up our race winner, or soon-to-be race winner, with a couple of corners to go for the moment, until and depending if it gets looked at or not. We do say a question mark over his head, because if it's reported, it'll be looked at, but if it's on the broadcast, it will be reviewed, and it was on the broadcast. Aldo Benedetti
just gone up the inside the last corner.
He has. Aldo Benedetti wins it. Hathaway 2nd, Zach 3rd. Boak has managed to snatch away a 4th place from Brendan Ross at the last gasp. Brenton Foley comes home 6th after being outside the top 10. Devonish was leading this race until his off at turn 3 a couple of laps into the race, recovers to 7th. BDS gets home the 2nd of the HDS cars. Dwayne Davies inside the top 10. Great job for Dwayne Davies. And Turmo finishes 10th out of the top 10. And Gary Neville's now finished ahead of Ricky Slick. So this is probably a bit unusual for Ricky Slick. He's just been locked in this battle here with Steve Burko over 12th and 13th place. So what happened to Ricky Slick in that? He's going to be most annoyed that he's finished behind both Brendan Ross and Gary Neville, being the older statesman in that squad. Burko 13th, Rutledge 14th, Brownie 15th, and Glenn Miles, the last of the classified runners, in 16th. So that is a huge swing in this championship that we've just witnessed tonight in terms of positional gain. Oh, that's a huge run-in, and that's Benedetti, and I believe that was Devonish. Yes, it was.
That was
and
Dish.
I reckon that was retaliation. Retaliation for what happened down at turn 3 earlier on in the race, but we're going to have to put that one to the side for the moment, because there's a few other bits of business that we're going to have to attend to in the next few minutes, but we don't like to see that. We normally see during the race weekend that there is a little bit of bumping and a little bit of rubbing and all the sorts of things like that, but that's the first time in a very, very long time I've seen an act of retaliation, and thankfully it was at the end of the race, Rhodey.
Exactly, yeah, that had the potential. Will did a great job recovering from that. I didn't actually see the spin. I was obviously that far buried in the pack, but he was at one point just in front of me, so to get back to where he did finish is good. But yeah, I don't blame him if he was winning the race, and there was a bit of contact that potentially could be seen by Will as an intentional move. He is going to get Honda on the collar, because that was he would feel that was a win very much stolen from him. So yeah, I can't exactly blame him for that, but yeah, we would hope that that emotions would be somewhat better controlled, especially on the racetrack. But yeah, I suspect the stewards are going to be a little busy based on that response.
Yeah, I tend to agree. We'll let the stewards and the DSO sort those ones out because there were a few. The race one was fairly clean. Race two, there was action aplenty and there was plenty of elbows out. So we'll let the stewards sort that one out. But for the moment, we'll get our top three in here. We'll go in reverse order this time because I want to say a very, very big congratulations. We've been talking this man up for a little while about a potential podium. He was on for one at Townsville, and he's finally snaffled his first one here in AMS Oz Super 2 in race 14 of the 21 race season. Zach, welcome to the podium.
Thanks, guys. Very much appreciated. Thank you.
Well,
thank you for having me.
That's all right. We've been talking, as I said, we've been talking you up for a little bit here for the last couple of races. You've definitely showed some really, really good car pace and some good car control. Bit of bad luck at Townsville, where you ended up with a non-finish for an engine failure. But for the races that you have completed so far, fourth place, 2 fifth places, and now a third, you're starting to make some waves, and you look like you've got a handle on these cars pretty quickly. Talk us through your race.
Yeah, I was just sort of, I don't know how to explain it really. Just saw the opportunity. I dive bombed a late a few times, and luckily people saw me, and they sort of moved a little bit, and I managed to get through without cleaning anyone up. Apologetic for that, but other than that, I've had a pretty good run, which is good for me. The other series I run with my other mate, I tend to crash out a lot. So, yeah, other than that, I've had a pretty good run.
Well, we did see you make a couple of very, very good passing moves under brakes, particularly into turn 3. One or two of those moves didn't quite come off as you expected them to come off. You ended up having to battle for position. You did have a fistful of opposite lock at one stage out of turn 3 as well, so you did a very, very good job of saving that. But is passing a strong suit for you, or is it something you sort of second guess yourself if you've actually made the passing move stick or not?
No, I don't really second guess myself. I sort of just throw it in there and see if it sticks, and then or hope it sticks. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does. My knuckles that time though, were pretty white, so I was gripping the steering wheel pretty hard, so it was pretty intense racing for me.
I can imagine so, especially with having to catch a couple of slides and being quite in the thick of those battles in that top 4, along with Mitchell, Aldo, and of course Brendan Ross was in there as well. But you've come out with your first podium, so job well done, and looking forward to see what you can do in the back third of the season, starting at the end of the month. Well done again.
No troubles. Thanks, guys.
Second place man, Mitchell Hathaway. So Mitchell, a return to the podium for you. Your best result for a couple of rounds now. You've actually been well and truly entrenched in the top 5 for most of the races that you've finished the season. You're, of course, the race 1 winner on debut from the rear of the grid in Adelaide. But good to be back on the podium again.
Yeah, it's good to get a finish, actually. I was pretty annoyed. Didn't get to start in Townsville. I really fancied my chances there, so I really thought I could have got on the podium there. But, yeah, good to just get some points tonight and, get a good result.
Move the mic a bit closer for us if you can, mate. You're a little bit quiet. It's actually on that Townsville topic. Talk us through what happened at Townsville, because it was a little bit of an unusual situation. You sort of went out there and you DNF'd very, very early. What happened?
Yeah, I thought I'd give it a crack, but I just had cars lagging everywhere, so I pulled the pin pretty early.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, we have had a couple of people with some lag issues and some internet connection issues over the course of the season as well. I mean, it springs to mind Brenton Foley had several earlier on in the season, which led to him having to play catch-up to his teammate throughout the season. No such troubles for you tonight. Stayed out of trouble, but there were a couple of incidents with a few comings together down at turn 3. You were right in the thick of it. Talk us through how you handled what happened down there, because it seemed to be the action zone tonight, turn 3.
Yeah, it wasn't my intention. Just saw the big train of cars on the racing line and decided to go deep. I'd like to stick those moves, so apologies to the PBF car and Zach for that incident. But tried to readdress straight away. But what can I do? Just keep going.
All right, not a worry. Your mic's having a little bit of trouble there, mate. But again, congratulations on your 4th podium of the season, and you are certainly well and truly in the hunt for this championship. Keep it up.
Thank you.
All right, first place man. Second visit to the podium for the night, Aldo Benedetti. You've gone 2 better than you did in race number 1, mate. Well done. You're on the top step.
Thank you. It was a very a difficult race. I have to apologize to Brenton for getting a terrible start. I went nowhere, but through a bit of carnage, I somehow ended up winning the race.
Yeah, you're right. There was a little bit of carnage, and as we were just saying with Mitchell, the carnage spot seemed to be turn 3. Now, there was a little bit of a coming together with a couple of people down there. You were one of the people that was involved in that. I'd imagine that's probably where some of the apologies are coming from, just battling with the other drivers and getting a bit caught up.
Well, perhaps I did have a look at the first incident with Will, but he did move under braking and left me with nowhere to go. So he started moving just before the apex, and it was right in front of my car. And unfortunately, I hit him, and he sort of pitched into the PBF car and spun around. So unfortunately, that happened. And then the one with Philip later on, I was on the outside, but he sort of ran a little bit wide, and his left rear wheel locked with mine, and unfortunately he went around.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did see some of that on the broadcast, and definitely a couple of items that we think will be investigated. But you've sort of started to come on strong in the last couple of times you've been in the car. We've seen that you've got glimpses of speed. This, as you said earlier, this circuit tends to be one of the easier circuits to learn, and the lap times tend to be pretty close, which is the way that it's been. Coming up after this, though, is, I guess, a throwback to history in terms of Calder Park Raceway. Now, I'm sure you've heard of it, even very vaguely. What are your thoughts in dipping your toe in a little bit of nostalgia?
Well, I don't know if I was driving, but I do remember Craig Lowndes' big crash there in '99. It will be a very important track for braking and traction.
Yeah, it certainly will. Another one of those circuits where braking extremely important. Very long front straight, several chicanes that have to be negotiated, and very, very important, as you said. Well, for the moment, again, congratulations on 2 podiums tonight, a third and a first place, and looking forward to seeing if you end up behind the wheel again very, very shortly.
Thank you, and maybe not next round, but who knows what after that.
Yep, sure. Well, with 2 races at Queensland Raceway over and done with tonight, the little bit of swings and roundabouts. The overall point standings have become very, very interesting. Now, we're still working out a couple of these items, but what we do know is the top 3 has definitely closed up a little bit here. So Phil Boker's lost a bit of his points advantage, but he managed to get a little bit of it back in that second race. So the points deficit from Boak to Foley now stands at 72. It was 114 coming into the night. And Devonish was 303 back, and he's now only 180 back of Boak at the moment. So it has swung quite a little bit in this last couple of races. And with that being said, we are now approximately 2/3 of the way through this championship season. So, as we said, coming up next, Calder Park Raceway, dipping our toe in a little bit of nostalgia for 2 last sprint races for the season. And then we get involved in what we're coining the season of endurance. So, look at that. Feature race, Pukekohe, the big endurance classic Mount Panorama. Then feature races at Sydney Motorsport Park, Sandown Raceway, the home of horsepower, and then Oran Park deputising for the final round of the season at Newcastle. Now, I've got Brenton Foley here, and I'm just going to ask the question, Brenton, about whether or not the option for the qualifying has been pitched for Mount Panorama for the endurance race and whether or not it's been received. But can you confirm or deny that's been put out?
Unfortunately, we ran out of time during the briefing tonight, but I'm going to write it up and put it to everyone quite soon.
Okay, so we'll hold off on making an announcement about that, but there is some motions afoot that there might be a little bit of an interesting precursor to the Mount Panorama endurance race there on the calendar. So stay tuned for some more information about that. But for the moment, we bid you adieu. Round 9 is over and done with at Queensland Raceway, and we will see you a bit later on at the end of August for Calder Park. My name's been Nether. As always, please drive safely, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.